Welcome to WION. You're watching Inside South Asia with me, Neha, Khanna. It's the show that takes an in-depth look at the week's biggest news stories from South Asia and how they impact your life. On the show today, we bring you the story of Nepal's flying coffins. Another air disaster in the Himalayan nation has left 72 people dead. At least 17 air crashes since 2000, yet nothing seems to change. Here's a quick look at what's coming up. Described as Nepal's worst air disaster in 3 decades. Last Sunday, a Yeti Airlines plane flying from Kathmandu to the tourist town of Pokhara crashed, leaving 72 people dead. Unfortunately, air crashes in the Himalayan nation are not an uncommon phenomenon. Quite the opposite, in fact. Nepal witnesses an air crash practically every year. While treacherous weather and terrain do pose an enormous challenge, it is human apathy that is a far bigger problem. Poor training of airlines crew and shoddy maintenance of aircraft, coupled with total inaction of the government, despite multiple air disasters, have meant hundreds of lives have been lost. Here's the story of Nepal's flying coffins. In a chilling deja vu for Nepal, yet another horrific air crash last week left all on board dead. 70 dead bodies of passengers and crew have been found. The other 2 presumed dead. It's been described as the Himalayan nation's worst air disaster in 3 decades. Among those killed were 5 Indians. The final moments of the plane were caught on a Facebook Live video shot by one of the Indian passengers, Sonu Jaiswal. Everything appeared hunky-dory. The friends were having fun. Just moments later, there was a loud bang, the sound of a crash, and images of leaping flames and blood-curdling screams. As the plane plunged into a steep gorge, smashed into pieces, and burst into flames.
We were mobilized initially with a target to rescue as many passengers alive as possible. But it was a big accident, and the aircraft was separated into 3 big pieces, so we could not find any passengers alive. All that we could find were bodies.
The town of Ghazipur in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh has been awash in grief. 4 of the crash victims were from this town. Yet again, it was a Yeti Airlines flight. The aircraft was flying from Kathmandu to Pokhara when it went down. Witnesses described the spine-chilling moment when the plane crashed.
It was around 10:30 a.m. in the morning, and 3 of us, including my husband, me and the neighbor, were sitting in the sun. The plane flew above our heads and we thought it was making a turn. But we noticed that the rotator on the other side was not functioning and the aircraft looked tilted. As we were looking, it first crashed onto the right side of the cliff and then broke into 2 halves.
The latest tragedy comes as a painful reminder of Nepal's troubled aviation history, pockmarked by multiple disasters. Practically every year, the Himalayan nation witnesses an air crash. Here's a heart-wrenching testimony of this sad reality. The co-pilot on last Sunday's flight was 44-year-old Anju Khadivada. 16 years ago, she had lost her husband, also a pilot, in eerily similar circumstances. He died in a Yeti Airlines plane crash in 2006. Reports say Anju used the insurance money she had received following her husband's plane disaster to train as a pilot. She joined Yeti Airlines in 2010. 13 years on, she has met the same fate as her husband. So what has changed in the last 16 years? Unfortunately, nothing it seems, as precious lives continue to be lost in air crashes with alarming regularity. Nepal has seen 17 plane crashes since 2000. Hundreds of lives have been lost. While its aviation industry has boomed in recent years, the country has a very poor air safety record. Nepal also has some of the world's remotest and trickiest runways, flanked by snow-capped peaks with difficult approaches and capricious weather. In many of these crashes, Yeti Airlines, Nepal's second biggest carrier, was involved. Ironically, its founder too died in a helicopter crash in 2019. Nepal's aviation sector has been plagued by poor safety thanks to insufficient training and maintenance. The situation became so grave that in 2013, the European Union decided to ban all Nepali carriers from its airspace over safety concerns. The question is, who is to blame? The government of Nepal has a track record of failing to act despite the innumerable air tragedies that continue to haunt the country. Over the years, successive investigations into air crashes have revealed that the crew did not follow protocol. There was insufficient flight training by the airline's management and inadequate oversight by Nepal's Civil Aviation Authority. Clearly, the crew, the airlines and the government all were at fault. Yet, no arrests made, no action taken, no accountability fixed, none of the recommendations made by experts ever implemented. It's always poor weather, cockpit miscommunication and pilot error that are blamed, and in no time it is business as usual. Now consider this. Tourism is one of the primary mainstays of Nepal's economy. According to the Nepal Rashtra Bank, the tourism sector provides employment to about 20% of Nepal's workforce and contributes to 3% of its GDP. According to the Nepal Tourism Board data, more than 600,000 tourists visited Nepal in 2022. In 2019, just before the COVID pandemic, Nepal had received 1.3 million foreign tourists, all of whom arrived by plane. Therefore, we need to ask, aren't the Nepal government's lax safety standards and complacency putting scores of lives in jeopardy? It is clear that planes in Nepal are flying coffins. Yet, the government chooses to look the other way until the next tragedy strikes and a fresh blame game begins. A new report confirms what we've known all along, that the rich are getting obscenely richer, and the gulf between the rich and the poor is wider than ever before. Rights group Oxfam International recently released the India supplement of its annual inequality report at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And here are some staggering figures. The richest 1% in India now own more than 40% of the country's total wealth. Yes, you heard that right. Makes your head spin, doesn't it? No wonder the report is titled Survival of the Richest.
It's a story of two worlds, distinct and growing further and further apart. Oxfam's report released at the World Economic Forum meet in Davos spells out the rich versus poor, haves versus have-nots divide that grew starker in 2022. 1% of India's richest, 40% of the country's wealth. That's the finding. And half of the population, that's the financially weakest group of Indians, own just 3% of that share. And India is just one part of the global picture of ideas of equality and parity gone horribly wrong.
So our report is called Survival of the Richest because what we see is that the wealthiest 1% of humanity is amassing double the wealth of the 99% of humanity. So that means 1% is taking so much and the 99% in this moment of great crisis are really not getting enough. We know 1 person in 10 is suffering from hunger, 1.7 billion workers around the world whose wages are not going up at the pace of inflation, for example.
From the start of the pandemic to November last year, billionaires in India saw a wealth surge of 121%. That's over 3,600 crore rupees or $900 million every day. Put the numbers out in relative terms and some stark realities emerge. The combined wealth of India's 100 richest, that's over 54 lakh crore rupees or 550 billion US dollars, will fund India's entire union budget for more than 18 months. If India's billionaires are taxed just once at 2% on their entire wealth, the yield would be over 40,000 crore rupees. That's more than 10 billion US dollars. And it would support nutrition of the country's entire malnourished population for the next 3 years. Taxing India's top 100 billionaires at just 2.5% would cover nearly the entire amount needed to bring the country's children back to school. Oxfam has called for inheritance, property and land taxes, as well as net wealth taxes for billionaires as corrective measures.
Billionaires can definitely be part of the solution. They have the power and they have the funds to solve these issues. The poor person doesn't. So I think billionaires paying their tax, not hiding it in tax havens, really contributing to society, will make them be more of a part of this new phase that we can all move towards and hopefully be in time to save our planet as well.
The findings and suggestions assume big significance ahead of India's union budget, to be presented on the 1st of next month. Oxfam has urged one-off solidarity wealth taxes and windfall cess to end the crisis profiteering. The alarm bells ring hard, and in your face. Will lessons be learned?
In an unprecedented ruling, Sri Lanka's Supreme Court has ordered the former president, Maithripala Sirisena, to pay 100 million rupees or over 273,000 US dollars from his personal funds as compensation to the families of the victims of the 2019 Easter bombings. 3 churches and 3 luxury hotels across Sri Lanka had been attacked on Easter Sunday that year, leaving 270 people dead. In fact, several top government, police and intelligence officers have been told to cough up money. Why? Because the court found that the then president and other officials were responsible for failing to prevent the bombings as they ignored multiple warnings about an imminent terror attack weeks before it took place. Here's a report.
April 21, 2019. It was Easter Sunday, the day Sri Lanka saw its most vicious terror attacks. 3 churches and 3 luxury hotels in the capital Colombo were targeted in a series of coordinated ISIS-related terrorist suicide bombings. 269 people were killed, including 45 foreign nationals. 500 were injured. State intelligence said a second wave of attacks was planned but was stopped. Tremors of that dark day ring out even now. Nearly 4 years on, the Sri Lankan Supreme Court ruling on the bombings puts the heat on then-President Maithripala Sirisena and then Prime Minister and sitting President Ranil Wickremesinghe for big intelligence failures. The Supreme Court in Colombo ruled that the respondents named violated fundamental rights of the petitioners by their failure and negligence to act on prior warnings and intelligence reports. It points at reckless negligence despite terror alerts from India. The court orders the then-President Sirisena to pay 100 million Lankan rupees as compensation to the kin of the deceased. That is about 275,000 US dollars. Take a look at the men the Supreme Court deems responsible for the lapses. At the center of one of Sri Lanka's most high-profile cases, then-President Maithripala Sirisena, former Defence Secretary Hemasiri Fernando, former Police Chief Pujit Jayasundara, and former National Intelligence Chief Sisira Mendes. Curiously, current President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who was Prime Minister when the blast happened, gets away due to the immunity he now enjoys as chief of the country's executive. Former President Sirisena now says he does not have the means to pay compensation. He even says he might be pushed to begging for funds. The writing is on the wall. Lapses by government officials caused the deadliest terror attacks Sri Lanka has ever seen. Yet the government cannot be made to pay. Cut to members of the public who still look to pick up the pieces. Local vendors to regular worshippers, a universal theme is anger and frustration writ large.
Even if the president does give up money, how will he compensate for the dead? How do you compensate for people who are no longer there? It was innocent and small people like us who were killed in those attacks. Families who lost their parents and children that can never return back to what it was. So can money fix that? People went to church with their families with such happiness that day, and this is what happened. Now each president is palming off the responsibility to one another, but who will bring back the loved ones of the deceased?
Indian intelligence group
The Indian intelligence officials had clearly warned of an attack taking place and had informed of precautions to be taken to mitigate this attack. It is so saddening to think of the lives lost, but also how tragic the lives of those who have been permanently injured must be, since they now have to spend the rest of their lives with such injuries.
It was 8:45 a.m. when a suicide bomber detonated his vest at the Kochikade St. Anthony's Shrine. That moment lingers. Life may have pushed activity back on track, but visible scars on the structure are a grim reminder of wounds that will take an eternity to heal. The psyche of the common man in Sri Lanka bears a similar wound.
267 lives lost, with over 500 individuals injured. This is Sri Lanka's worst terror attack as of recent times, and it has now been revealed that could have entirely been prevented if not for the negligence of former authorities and state officials. Although Sri Lanka's topmost court, the Supreme Court, has now ordered for the former president, along with few other state authorities, to pay for compensation, the real cost is, what is the actual compensation for the loss of lives that will never return to their loved ones and families? And many still believe that their prayers for justice will go unanswered. Reporting for WION World is One from Colombo, I'm Dasunia Thauda.
Now you can enjoy the world's longest luxury river cruise right here in India. Flagged off in Varanasi in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, MV Ganga Vilas will cover a journey of 3,200 kilometers in 51 days. But don't pack your bags just yet, because believe it or not, this river cruise is fully booked till March 2024.
India's iconic holy river now boasts a whole new dimension, a new avatar. The wholly indigenous Ganga River cruise will be, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi put it, a unique amalgam of modern and ancient. With MV Ganga Vilas, India joins a very special global tourism club, entering a new era. There's a realization of the appeal of low-volume, low-impact, slow tourism that a river cruise holds out.
आज मेरी काशी से डिब्रूगढ़ के बीच दुनिया की सबसे लंबी नदी जल यात्रा गंगा विलास क्रूज का शुभारंभ हुआ है। इससे पूर्वी भारत के अनेक पर्यटक स्थल वर्ल्ड टूरिज्म मैप में और प्रमुखता से आने वाले हैं।
Uber luxury tourism vessel MV Ganga Vilas is out on its first 51-day, 3,200-kilometer cruise. Varanasi to Dibrugarh via Patna and Kolkata cities through Bangladesh and back into Indian territory. The voyage will cross 27 river systems and 50 heritage and culture spots en route, both in India and Bangladesh. Meet the debut group of tourists on board MV Ganga Vilas, 32 Swiss nationals who've signed up for the full journey. Besides putting India on the global tourism map, the amenities too are world-class. On the 3 decks on board are 18 suites that comply with global 7-star hospitality standards, besides the spas and sun decks and top-end luxury interiors. The price tag for the cruise, if that matters, works out to about 15 lakh rupees per passenger. That's $18,000 for 51 days, or $300 to $600 a day, depending on which stage of the cruise you book for. No shortage of takers either. The cruise is sold out till March 2024. What matters is the fact that there's been a rising curiosity worldwide about seeing India, knowing India and understanding India. This journey looks to achieve that and more through accessing a medium untouched by mass tourism. Studies say the global river cruise market has grown over 5% in the last few years and will make up 37% of the overall cruise market by 2027. Europe holds 60% of the river cruise market share as of now. MV Ganga Vilas signals things are on the way up in India too. More than anything else perhaps, the Ganga River cruise throws open the massive potential of what's been called water tourism in India. A series of cruise circuits are being developed on the Ganga, Brahmaputra and Mahanadi rivers. Surveys are on over 52 waterways in all, including river tributaries, mangrove forests and lakes. Water tourism marks a mindset shift. Historic rivers exploited and polluted for decades now become potential cruise destinations.
And finally, for as long as one can remember, the Taliban have made news only for their medieval laws, public executions and floggings, infringement of Afghan women's rights, ban on women's education and employment. The list goes on. So who could have thought that the Taliban regime would make headlines for unveiling Afghanistan's first indigenously built supercar? That's exactly what happened last week. Don't believe us? Take a look. The Taliban and a glitzy supercar. Quite an incredible image that. Well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Inside South Asia. Do join us again next week as we return with all the big news stories from the region. Till then, stay safe and well. I'm Neha Khanna signing off. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to WION. World is One.